Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another spectacular edition, likely the final regular old show edition of the Court-Martail Podcast. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, here bringing you the hottest action, the hottest smart talk, and all them spicy news bits, but I cannot claim that I am the master of the news, because that man is this man. The man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area Brawler himself, my co-host in crime, Skylar Greenberg. By the way, happy birthday. He celebrated a birthday this week.
I did, December 16th, and I celebrated it by watching my hockey team lose the game against Vancouver.
How the Sharks doing, by the way? I have not been keeping up with the standings.
We are perfectly mediocre, 500.
Okay. That sounds about shark-like. So,
it's better than the last few seasons when we were complete ass.
Yeah, never go complete ass. That's the only thing. If only Joe Thornton was still on the Sharks, but that was a long ass time ago.
Now he's in Florida, which is weird.
Yeah, and God, how old is he? Well, we're going to talk about hockey a different time. This is a wrestling podcast, although we should do a sports episode of the Court-Martail Podcast at some point, because it would be quite kind of fun.
It would. We could discuss all of our favorite sports and why we hate each other's teams.
And we also, considering that we talk sports very similarly to how we talk wrestling as far as how they book champions and whatnot, it would make for some interesting conversation.
Get over yourself, Mr. John Cena, Tom Brady.
Hey, that proves my point. I mean, did you see that game against the Bills? They basically handed that to him. I mean...
When don't they hand something to Brady?
I know. Well, before we bury the lead here and get too sidetracked, I just want to say something real quick. Before we get in too far, I just want to say thank you to all the members of the Court-Martail Podcast who have reached out to me, extending their condolences and whatnot over my dad and the tribute video. So I just want to say thank you. It's really nice having the support of all of you here, and it's always encouraging to know that y'all are there, and we will continue on as energetically and vibrantly as we have been for the past 300 and however many days we are in now. But with that said, we have got more than just that in the news. We have such a stack of news that if it were each piece of news were a pancake, it would be a huge stack of pancakes. Roll that intro. Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skylar Green.
That is right, folks. It is the news of the week with the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg yourself. And as Sean said, there's so much news. If it was a stack of pancakes, the New Day would be throwing them all over the arena.
If it were a stack of pancakes, Chris Jericho would somehow gravitate toward it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, let's go ahead and get to the biggest piece of the news and the one that we found out the day after we recorded last week's show.
Yeah, boy, well,
so
yeah.
Let me go ahead and introduce it. So, last week's show, we talked about the house show events of Jeff Hardy and whether or not he was okay or not. And apparently, he has been released from his contract by WWE. Now, the caveat to this is that WWE asked Jeff Hardy to go to rehab, and Jeff Hardy said no. And WWE like, you know what? Fine. We'll release you. We're done with this.
Well, but that was not the end of the story.
Oh, it's not the end of the story.
Because we speculated at that time about Jeff and the typical things that are associated with Jeff, the things that we didn't want to speculate about last week.
But now we're totally going to speculate about this week.
Yes.
Why don't you introduce the lead then?
Well, so then we get this whole thing because, of course, Jeff's substance abuse issues, and it made it look very much like maybe that's what happened. Even though Jeff's wife was like, well, maybe you could say Jeff's okay, get the lead on that, or whatever it was, basically telling everyone to go fuck themselves. And we're past the 3-minute mark, so we're good to say that and still remain monetizable. But in any case, so then she sent this, and finally we get a video with Matt Hardy and Jeff, where Matt Hardy and Jeff looked pretty good, just from what I saw. Jeff is doing an acoustic tour, and a meet and greet tour is the next piece we've gotten
acoustic
out of
guitar.
this. Yes. So what that means, so now we have a whole different set of speculation of, was it a work?
Or was it Jeff Hardy doing a shoot and just quitting?
Yeah, now there's even there's almost more questions than answers now than there were before. Because it could be one of those things where Jeff wanted to do it. WWE said, let us take some of your money to do it. Jeff was like, nah, and found a way out that would make it a lot easier for him to continue with his contract and not have to worry about all the stuff. And because they know the substance issues that Jeff has had, maybe they were like, you know what, screw it, we're done. But who knows now? Maybe it was Jeff trying to just get his release so he could do what he wants to do and be happy, because let's face it, WWE's schedule is incredibly grueling, especially for a guy who takes the bumps that Jeff Hardy does.
And at the age that Jeff Hardy is.
Yeah. And, you could tell, even though he's been putting on great matches, that it does wear on him. You could tell it's been wearing on him.
Right. He's been wrestling this style for years now. I'm sure he's not exactly a fan of doing the bumps they used to do. There's also, of course, speculation that eventually he'll be joining his brother in the other company.
Right. Which...
And
I don't
know how to feel about that.
I hope they stay as far away from each other as humanly possible. I don't want Jeff anywhere near Matt Hardy.
They're going to be paired up with each other.
I know.
It's the Hardys.
But I don't want Matt...
up with each other.
I don't want Jeff anywhere near what Matt's doing right now. That's my point. Because what Matt's doing right now is just not good. It's just the talent...
If anything, Jeff Hardy will probably make things better.
We hope. I mean...
There's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee. That's the problem is, it's like, Jeff Hardy was just as much a part of the broken stuff as Matt was, and he came out as Itchweed that one time. He's got the whole Willow gimmick, which I like the Willow gimmick. I don't know about the Itchweed gimmick, where he came out with a weed whacker. Did you see that?
It was terrible.
It was Jeff Hardy, and they tried to make it sound like it wasn't, but it was Jeff Hardy, all right. So
we're all aware, Brother Nero.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Jeff won't just go and do the silly stuff that Matt does in AEW, because he can. I don't know. I don't know. But from what I saw, I don't suspect that substances were as much in play as we might suspect.
Watching it back now with what we know, it almost kind of feels like an exaggerated version of what Shawn Michaels did with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Kind of that ridiculous selling, and just it was, at the very least, it's very unprofessional.
Yeah, well, yeah, I will never say that it's not an unprofessional thing to do. If it's true, and that's the way that Jeff decided that was how he was going to get out of his contract, that's kind of a scummy way to get out of your contract. Not going to lie.
But given the people that he worked for,
yeah,
that's the thing, is that as much as I hate the act that Jeff Hardy did, on some level I'm going to support him, because look at who he's working for.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. And you also look at the people like Beth Phoenix and Scotty 2 Hotty, who have left just being like, I just can't be a part of this anymore. It's like, I gotta bounce. Maybe Jeff is at that point in his career where he's like, I really just can't do this for them anymore, and that's that. And maybe that was the only way that he figured he'd be released, is if they thought that he was messed up on alcohol, and so they released him, and now Jeff's kind of like, maybe Vince just got played.
Maybe he did, but I'm sure the lawyers are working up stuff even as we speak.
Well, I still think this is a developing story, but boy, has it developed.
Oh, yes. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about a person who has chosen to stay with the evil empire, as it has been named by one Jim Cornette, the KO Show. Kevin Owens has reportedly resigned with WWE.
Did you see the estimated amount that he's going to be getting?
He's getting paid.
Yeah. He's getting paid, what was it, like $2 to $3 million a year is the plan?
Well,
at least that's the words that I got. And he deserves it. He totally deserves it.
He totally deserves it. And this is also one of those things where I really do appreciate Kevin Owens for what he does. I think Kevin Owens, in a world that doesn't have a lot of real in it, is probably the most real person that WWE has. Because whenever Kevin Owens does something, it. There's a sense of realism. There's a sense of Kevin Owens actually doing what he says and feels, and I appreciate that in a more manufactured WWE.
Yeah, the way I would say it is that he gets a lot more creative liberties, whether it's as a talker, whether it's the kind of actions he takes. I think that they allow his gimmick to be his. In a lot of ways that they don't do that for other wrestlers, where they have to tweak and pinch and pluck here and there at gimmicks and make them do stupid things like have three sisters that are clearly not women, and and have I don't know why I'm singling out Bobby Lashley here, but have like the cat's eyes. They don't do that with Kevin Owens. They let him be him, and it feels as organic as something that is manufactured as WWE. To your point, Sky, it makes it feel at least a little bit more tangibly less manufactured.
Even though I know you do not like Kevin Owens' look.
It's just the outfit. It's literally just the outfit at this point. I don't care about the rest. I don't care about the gut, because look at Samoa Joe. Look how great Samoa Joe has been over the years. Has Samoa Joe ever been a guy who's going to be ripped and toned? No. And I would, Kevin Owens has that same kind of appeal. I just don't like the shorts. I just never liked the shorts and the cut shirt, because it just looks so wrestling school. That's always been my only complaint.
Right?
Yeah, that's the only issue I've ever had with him. But he wrestles great. Again, he's a great talker. His in-ring stuff is almost always solid. There's always the occasional faux pas, but he's the only person who could literally just get counted out of a Survivor Series, throw some middle fingers up metaphorically, and leave, and everyone would be like, you know what? Props to Kevin Owens. He has the right idea.
He was the smartest man in that match because he got out of it as soon as he possibly could.
Yep.
Now, we're going to go ahead and go a little bit deeper into this, because I want to talk about the person who's in charge of all these choices, along with choices like letting go of Kyle O'Reilly or Johnny Gargano. Nick Khan. Did you see The Rock's Instagram story about him, Nick Khan, and his sister?
I did. And
it revealed an interesting link to me that I didn't know exists. First off, Nick Khan's sister being the producer of Young Rock, or the showrunner.
Yeah.
That I didn't know about that relationship. But the fact that Nick Khan grew up as a fan of wrestling with The Rock when they were younger,
well,
it always seems suspicious to me that Nick Khan had come into power and was an outsider. But no, he is a professional wrestling fan. But he's a professional wrestling fan who's grown up in the business world. Now he's come to wrestling, and with all the rumors of him taking over WWE when Vince McMahon eventually moves on. First off, here's my question. How do you feel about Nick Khan now?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily changes my opinion of Nick Khan that The Rock likes him. I think I was having this conversation actually with a friend of mine the other day. The Rock has really melded well into the nice and shiny polished turd of Hollywood. You know, and I'm not saying that The Rock is full of shit or anything like that, but it's just that nice glossy layer of I don't want to say insincerity, that's not it, but superficiality, that's the word I'm looking for. The Rock has blended very well into that. And I think that as somebody like Nick Khan, who has grown up with The Rock, it just, to me, it feels like as much as they want to portray Nick Khan as, oh, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, he's always going to act business oriented. It's not going to be about the wrestling, and it's not going to be like Tony Khan. At least to his credit, he's just a mark who had a lot of money but he studied some Mid-South, even though he's got some stupid stuff. I'm not saying that he's the greatest booker. He's not Booker of the Year by any means, but at least to Tony Khan's credit, he was a fan and was a lot more just I have a lot of money and start up, but you could see his passion. I don't see passion out of Nick Khan. I see let's make money out of Nick Khan. And I think that this connection to The Rock is just more movement to kind of get some sympathy, some babyface shine on Nick Khan as they prepare to do this move, as they know it's not going to get much better.
Well, here's my question for you. Do you feel like Nick Khan, there's some sort of weird coup, because like 4 or 5 years ago, we all thought Triple H was going to take over. And now it doesn't seem like that's going to happen anymore.
I believe this all started, I believe Vince realized that there's a lot more money to be made by selling to one of these large-ass streaming services that are going to be bringing in billions. Vince understands the business sense of Vince McMahon was there's more money in it for him not to pass it off to his children, but to pass it off to somebody who's going to give them some sort of royalty rights for the rest of their lives. And because of the relationship that Vince McMahon has always had with NBC, let's not mistake this. From the time that Dick Emersol was running NBC, Vince McMahon has had a very good run with them, and I think that that's where this ended up. He's like, there was nothing to benefit Vince McMahon from passing it off to Triple H, and because I think Vince looks at the old NXT as really more of a failure because Vince couldn't see the star power in any of the people Triple H brought in, that has turned this decision to what it's become. And it's a shame.
That's the whole thing. Let's stop there for a second, because is it the fact that there's no star power in the people that Triple H has signed, or is it that WWE has taken away what makes him so special? Let's go to Kevin Owens for a second as an example. Kevin Owens, when he came in, and that first year or two in NXT, and then that first year or two in the main roster, everything about Kevin Owens was great. He was a great heel, vicious, angry, intimidating, and more importantly, real. He's a father. He's providing for his family, but he doesn't care about you and your feelings. He's going to kick your ass to make a check and get championships, because that's how you get money in wrestling. And they slowly, over time, just stripped everything away from Kevin Owens' character. And not that Kevin Owens is bad now, but he's not what he was at the beginning.
Oh, no, without a doubt. I mean, and you could say that he's just one of any number of examples of that, but that's what they do. That's their whole gimmick, WWE, is let's not get people over, let's get people the exact same. Only interesting if you're watching the show, but you don't want to see anybody, and this is no knock on anyone there, but realistically speaking, with the entire talent roster they have, save maybe Roman Reigns, but I wouldn't even include him in this at this point. Who do you want to see, if you're not a wrestling fan, who's going to stick out to you no matter what to get you to watch at this point? Who's got the personality to get you to watch at this point and keep you watching, given the fact that you know that maybe only one person ideally is going to have that sort of attraction quality to them, and even them they put in stupid stuff like the ring collapsing and the flopping red smoking fish, and it's at this point, recognizing what WWE is, their whole goal was to strip everyone that Triple H brought up of individuality and then hope that they would still want to do it and be loyal to what Vince wanted them to do. It's not about the character they've got, it's the loyalty to Vince that matters. And that's all that has ever mattered when it's come to WWF. Let's be honest about that.
No. It's not even that. It's about how much money can we make while not giving our wrestlers whatever they want. And how many of these sucker fans can we get to give us money for our terrible product by putting in as little effort as possible?
And then you wonder why Jeff Hardy might be faking alcohol episodes to leave so he could do an acoustic tour.
No, did you hear about the attendance at the Monday Night Raw this past week?
It was abysmal. I don't know the numbers, but I heard it was abysmal.
So December 13th, from St. Paul, Minnesota, they're in the XL Center, which is listed as being able to hold 18,000 people, and they have 5,192 tickets sold.
Yeah.
They couldn't even fill up a third of that arena. And not only could they not fill up a third of that arena, they have whole sections just tarped off. And they are empty. No one wants to go see a WWE show.
And you know what's the most messed up part of that whole thing is that because of these contracts that they're getting from NBC and from Fox, they don't even give a shit. They don't care whether there's not a soul in that building. Because now they've proven that they can do it without anybody there. And that's the scariest part of what's come out of this whole pandemic. They've just gotten a window into what they're going to do once everybody's gone and nobody wants to come to the shows anymore. And what's sad is they own the rights to all of those Thunderdome faces, and we'll be seeing those faces for the rest of eternity.
But the thing is that if no one goes to those shows and they have those Thunderdome faces, well, what are you going to do when you don't have an audience? When you have nobody watching your shows? Like, at a certain point, WWE has to change, or the fans are just not going to show up in general, and they're not going to make any money.
Well, my hope in this, the silver lining I have in all of this, is hopefully The Rock will buy in with Nick Khan. I hope that's what this tease was about, because he's bought the XFL. He's got that they're going to launch. It would not be beyond The Rock, considering the relationship they have and considering how much of a jaded girlfriend WWE is, if Vince McMahon had The Rock make an offer to him. I'm not saying that the answer would be no.
But the problem is that, do you trust The Rock to save WWE? Do you trust Dwayne Johnson to have the best interest for WWE?
No, I don't.
And that's the point.
But I do trust that The Rock has enough business sense to hear the pulse of the people enough to change what style of show they create. If The Rock can create a different format to that show that is interesting, or just something else at this point, just something else at this point, it doesn't even need to be better. It just needs to be different. And they will be a group of people that are going to watch it and obviously critique it, which is why we're here. But if he can change the formatting of that show, they might stand the chance. I would trust The Rock more than I would trust the McMahons, who are literally just coasting in to retirement and the sale that's inevitably going to happen.
Right. Now, let's go ahead and talk about an incident that happened on the independent wrestling scene that has really...
It's made waves.
It's made waves, and I do not want to give this guy any credits. I don't want to even really talk about this guy.
I don't want to spend too much time on this.
But on December 11th, at a wrestling show for a really, really shitty independent wrestling company called World Class Pro Wrestling, there's this guy. His name is Devin Nicholson. His gimmick is Hannibal, or the Blood Hunter, and he must have blood. Notedly, this guy attacked the referee and use a spike, but he starts stabbing him with the spike in the head, and the referee had a panic attack, into shock from blood loss, required staples in his head, and had to go do emergency surgery for the injuries.
Yeah, he lost something like 1.5 liters of blood or something.
He should have died.
Yeah.
He should have died losing that 1.5 liters of blood. The script for the post-match was that Nicholson would hit him with the spike and then he would go down and blade. But then what happens is that this guy, I'm not even going to promote the video, just starts continuously stabbing him. And this guy is off the hinges. He is crazy. Apparently there was talk that he was boozed up and he was on something. This was shit. And let me just say right now, I hate this guy. This guy can go fuck himself.
I've never liked this dude. And if you want to hear a little bit more about my first impressions of this guy, go and watch the Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar. I believe that's the one it was on. Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar from 2003 Match of the Week live stream, where I forget what he did. I think that he said something about Jim Cornette, something stupid, and then Corny didn't even give him the light of day, and then he made another stupid video and started bragging, right? Like, oh, I've got all of these big videos that draw more than Jim Cornette, even though he doesn't. Oh, look at all my big list. I've got a big list of people that I do interviews from, which it's mostly Kevin Sullivan. I don't know why Kevin Sullivan hangs with this guy, but it's just, I had an issue with him then. And I was like, this guy's bad news. And I said that at the time. Here we are, fast forward, and I'm honestly not surprised that something like this happened. I'm really not. And his defense was awful. He's like, oh, I couldn't see in the mask that you wear to wrestle, by the way. And I'm just done with this guy. The fact that this guy was even remotely relevant after the first incident with Corny was shocking enough, but I think this was how you could justify this as a gimmick. Because I see people out there right now going, oh, you're all falling for the work. There was no work about that. You gotta understand, there was nothing that was a work about aggravated assault in the professional wrestling ring. Just because it's in a ring doesn't mean it's a work, folks.
No, and let's be clear, okay? This guy's an idiot. This guy didn't know how to properly stab someone with a spike. Like, come on. This is your gimmick. You should know what you're doing.
Yeah. And the other thing is, too, this guy has got the personality of drywall. It's he is so boring. Have you ever listened to one of his interviews with somebody?
No.
It's like literally he has no idea. He sounds like us. He has no idea what the hell he's talking. But we actually are a little bit more coherent than this guy. But
okay, hold on.
Dude
here's the real test. Does he sound smarter than Nick Gage?
No. I'm gonna say no.
Oh.
I'm gonna say only because Nick Gage actually has a fraction of personality. He might be a moron, but he is not a moron with the personality of drywall. And
Nick Gage is a charming moron. This guy is just a moron.
This guy's just a moron. And also, to be fair, Nick Gage, most of the time, he'd do the pizza cutter thing, whatever, and and break trust with people, mostly for drugs and all that. But the most damage that guy did was to himself. Realistically. You never heard of Nick Gage nearly killing people, except for David Arquette. But not nearly. I would say that I respect Nick Gage more than I respect this idiot.
And that's saying something.
And that's saying something.
You have for Nick Gage.
Because Nick Gage will at least be honest. He'll defend his shit. He'll be like, listen, I was in a bad place. I've done bad stuff, and I'm not gonna be shy about that. But he won't backtrack and be like, oh, I couldn't see through my mask when I was cutting somebody with a pizza cutter. He's like, no, I'm cutting you with a pizza cutter. This is what's happening. I don't get this. Like, this is how it's going down. I don't care what you think about it, but this is what's going down. He didn't go out there and literally spike someone nearly to death and then try to make excuses like he didn't know what he was doing.
Right, and I'm not going to talk about this guy anymore. He does not deserve any more clout or talking.
I hope he is tried to the fullest extent of the law, and I hope we never get to see from him again. If we don't, it'll be too soon.
Right. We'll go end this News of the Week segment on two unfortunate passings. We'll talk about one more in a little bit.
Yep.
The first passing is Jimmy Rave.
I contemplated doing like a double match of the week to put something in with him, and I just didn't end up finding the time to do it, although oddly enough, I feel like the match might have actually been superior. But it's still sad to see. I mean, Jimmy was what? He was only in his, maybe mid-late 40s?
He was 39.
Yeah, he was young, man. And it's unfortunately, you didn't really hear much of Jimmy Rave after Impact, and I don't know why that was, but I always liked his teaming with Lance Hoyt, or the now Lance Archer. They had the tag team titles. Rocket Rave Infection, it wasn't the greatest tag team, but they had their moments.
It's one of those things where I think Jimmy Rave was he's a decent mid-card wrestler. He did a lot of Ring of Honor. That's mostly where he made his name known. Like, he did TNA, but he was mostly a Ring of Honor guy.
Yeah. And he was talented. I'm not going to say that he was setting the roof on fire, but it was good. He was good.
He was a perfectly competent professional wrestler. That's kind of all you can ask for.
Yeah.
And best of luck. Our condolences go to Jimmy Rave's family.
Yeah, because that's 39, man. That's brutal. That is brutal.
And then, here's the thing. What did he die from? It was he had amputations. That sucks.
Yeah. Oh, I wonder what from. Did he have diabetes? Maybe.
Let me take a look.
Yeah. Well,
he did have diabetes. His legs were amputated.
Yeah. God, that's brutal.
Due to a MRSA infection. That just sucks.
Yeah. No. Hey, infections can get the better of you real quick. You got to keep an eye out for those. It's sad, but it's sad. It's definitely very sad, especially for somebody that young to go.
Right. And then the other one is Blackjack Lanza, who we will talk about in a second.
Yes.
He died at 86.
Yeah, which is hell of a run.
Hell of a run.
Hell of a run. And somebody who is very much tied to WWE, although probably more of the good parts of WWE, I'd hope.
But a lot of the old school WWE, back when it was the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, back in those days, with Vince Sr.
Well, and that's and really between that and his time in the AWA, and there are certain things we'll talk about him in a little bit that I didn't know prior to his joining Blackjack Mulligan to do what they ended up doing, and that was another sad one. But anytime you get to that age and you pass, it is a hell of a run, and so sad to see him go, but also great job making it to 86.
And we will honor his life by watching a wrestling match of his.
Yeah, well, but we're gonna get to that. But before we do that, all of these legendary tag teams, like the Blackjacks, always end up having some sort of second, rising from the ashes. The Phoenix dawns and flutters into the breeze. And sometimes, like in a Phoenix situation, it works. And other times, like in pro wrestling, it completely kills any chance of those people getting over. So we're going to talk about today the revisions, the second comings of some of these tag teams, why it generally doesn't work, and if it does, when has it worked and why has it worked. And we'll start with the Blackjacks, with the new Blackjacks, which was in fact Mulligan for a brief time and Bradshaw.
That's tough. Like, I love Bradshaw. Like, Bradshaw back in the early days, he was great. He was just green. He wasn't ready for it.
No.
And they put pressure on him by giving him the Blackjack gimmick.
Well, and also, anytime you're trying to be something that has already gotten over before and successful before, there's very little chance of that being actually getting over again. Because it's basically you're admitting to the audience, hey, remember this? How good was that? Let's do that again, right? Huh? Come on, guys. And everyone's like, nah, because it was great then, and these aren't the same people. Even if it's only half of the same person.
But it's always been a thing with wrestling where they try to capitalize on nostalgia. Like, remember when we used to do that? Well, we're going to bring it back, but we're going to put a twist on it.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be new people who reincarnate with the gimmick. And it was just, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Barry Windham and Bradshaw.
Barry Windham, I'm
Blackjacks.
sorry, it wasn't Mulligan, yes. It was Barry Windham, who is the son of Blackjack Mulligan. So it made sense that Barry Windham would be there. But also, with WWE, that's kind of a waste of Barry Windham.
Well, I mean, that was also Barry Windham at the end.
True.
If it had been a situation like where Barry Windham was teaching Bradshaw, that would have been fine. But Bradshaw was not ready for that, and Windham was not who he used to be.
Yeah, and maybe it did add to the gimmick of Bradshaw being a tough guy, but it really took a few iterations for him to finally get to APA level where you really got to that point. But it was just anytime that gimmick was doomed to fail. Because not only just because of the participants involved, but another example kind of like that, the New Rockers. Marty Jannetty and Leif Cassidy, a.k.a. Al Snow.
Oh, but that, again, it's always a situation where you're kind of put in a situation to fail because you can't copy the original.
Exactly. The New Midnight, which was Bob Holly and Bart Gunn.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about the Midnight in a minute, because there's a lot of things we can talk about with the Midnight.
Well, that's true.
The New Rockers, like, who was going to care about Marty Jannetty after Shawn Michaels kicked him?
Well, they did until they proper buried. Well, I was going to say till they buried him, but really Marty buried himself. What a kid, because he was going through, issues. I don't mean to make light of what Marty was going through at the time, but, when Marty won the Intercontinental Championship from Shawn Michaels in '94, everyone went banana for that. There was a time when people did care about Marty Jannetty, but once that stopped and he got his revenge on Michaels, they knew that he wasn't going to be getting the push that Michaels was. It was very clear what WWE's direction was heading, who was going to be the top and the bottom of that situation. It was always going to be Marty, but then they didn't do anything with him. And then they make the New Rockers, thinking that that's going to, hey, remember when Marty was with Shawn? Well, it's still Marty and not Shawn, so,
Well, here's the thing is that Marty Jannetty's career probably needs a look at, and maybe we'll do it in the future.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things with Marty Jannetty's career that was stop and start, and there's a reason why he didn't get to be where he was. And part of it is WWE, but a larger part of it is Marty Jannetty.
A lot of it was just Marty, yeah. Yeah. And, yeah, there's no disputing that Marty did a lot of it to himself.
But then, here's the interesting thing. Let's move on to the next team, the Midnight Express, because actually, the Midnight had successful iterations of itself, and then it got ruined. So think about this. The first Midnight Express was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Norvell Austin.
Yep. And that lasted for a very, very short amount of time.
Well, I mean, it lasted for 3 years.
Well, yeah, okay, if you're talking the Memphis iteration of the Midnight, with back in the day, yes. And then Dennis kind of left those two, and then they found found Bobby and Jim Cornette, and it took off. Yeah. And that was, well, honestly, that was because of Jerry Jarrett, because Jerry had found Cornette, and that Cornette had the affinity to it and kind of trained him up. But it was really once they debuted in Mid-South that things really took off for the Midnight Express.
Right, and that's a situation where they took a gimmick that was and then they made it better. Yeah,
and they turned it into arguably one of the best tag team gimmicks of all time, which really wasn't much of a gimmick. It was just them being badass. I mean, Dennis Condrey alone, he would work in any era at any time in any situation. I've got a tremendous respect for Dennis Condrey, as I do Bobby Eaton as well. We've discussed Bobby. Especially this year, now that we're at the end of this year, we've discussed a lot about Bobby Eaton of late.
But Dennis Condrey, he is one of the toughest SOBs in this business. You do not want to mess with Dennis Condrey.
Yeah. One of the unsung heroes, I think, of professional wrestling in the 80s that does not get the respect he deserves. And that's no knock on Sweet Stan Lane either. because their gimmick was different. Even though it was the same gimmick, they behaved and tagged differently, and it was a different vibe, and it was a different style of match, which, you know, I don't really like any one of those two iterations over the other because they're almost two completely different entities.
But they both do cool things just
Yes.
in different ways. And again, this is how you successfully take a gimmick and you update it slightly.
Mm-hmm.
You change certain things, but you keep the core principles, and you can make the gimmick Phoenix work by having it reincarnated.
Right.
And Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, you could argue, was almost just as good as Dennis and Bobby.
Yeah. Because they had different types of matches, and also Stan and Bobby also had the benefit of hitting Crockett when Crockett was at its highest. You know, when it was at the top moment of Jim Crockett Promotions in 86 and 87, which also gave him a huge leg up as far as what they were being treated as and how they were respected by Crockett. You know, and that also made a big help into why they got as over as they did, the way that they did.
Right. And then what you do is if you take a gimmick that has nostalgia in it and you decide to just ruin it for the sake of making money, you do what they did in 1998.
Yeah. And that gimmick was DOA. That gimmick was completely DOA. There was not a chance that was going to get over. And they knew it. They knew it too. And I don't understand, man. Maybe that was just a rib on Holly and Bart Gunn. But to think about that Bart Gunn went from the Billy and Bart Gunn with the smoking guns to the New Midnight to winning the Brawl for All.
No, he didn't win the Brawl for All.
Yes, he did. Bart Gunn won the Brawl for All and then faced Butterbean as punishment. That's how that went down. But Bart Gunn was not supposed to win, but he won. Yeah, what a time.
Jesus.
What a time. But
no, hold on. I've listened to some Jim Cornette, and he's talked about the New Midnight, and my understanding was that the reason why it was created was because Vince Russo wanted to bury them.
Yeah, I mean, again, what a surprise.
And he wanted to make the NWA look like shit.
Yeah, anything they could do to distance themselves from WCW and wrestling, they were going to do, which meant taking a dump all over anything that revolved or related to the NWA. Remember when Jeff Jarrett had the NWA title in 1998, and they literally did nothing with it?
They did absolutely nothing. Now, an NWA stable featuring Jeff Jarrett, Jim Cornette, and the Rock and Roll Express, that could have been something.
Yeah, but no. No.
But no.
Not on this day. Instead, we got the next group I want to add on to this, because this one is definitely interesting. And because it worked a couple times, but then it way overstayed its welcome. I am, of course, referring to D-Generation X.
I was just going to bring them up. It's just like...
97, Shawn and Hunter and Chyna worked. Triple H finding the army of the Outlaws and X-Pac worked. Them returning in 2006 still kind of worked. There was enough nostalgia there where people bought into it. It was definitely a little lesser. You know, obviously the shimmer was a little diminished, but they were in different times in their careers. It was a different feeling. They were facing Vince and Shane. There were actually some quality matches that came out of that. And some quality times that came out of that. And thankfully, Triple H got injured before that could overstay its welcome. And then they wouldn't stop. And then it was 2009 and 10 and 12. And it wouldn't stop. They just wouldn't stop doing it. The old school Raw where they did the whole click thing with Balor and Scott Hall, it just wouldn't stop. They wouldn't.
When the Outlaws won the tag team championships working for Triple H's authority.
They wouldn't stop doing it. And it just... With Triple H doing the DX thing when he won at the Rumble in 2016, they wouldn't let it go. And it just, the horse was dead. The horse was buried. The horse was uncovered from its grave and then just beaten to death again. It's just, it was too much. Honestly, the ultimate irony is that DX was always compared to the NWO, but eventually had more iterations than the NWO did, and that's really funny.
And then they just water it down. Like, hey, let's add this person to the stable. Let's add this person. Let's add this person.
Yeah, well, thankfully DX didn't do that with the exception of Hornswoggle. They kept it to the group that they needed it to, for the most part.
Look at the ancillary people that were part of DX. Rick Rude, Mike Tyson for a little bit, Stephanie McMahon, Tori.
Well, at least 2.5 out of those 4 names are relevant people. Yeah.
Who's the non-relevant person? Find out on DraftKings.com.
Place your bets now. But you know, for everyone like that, you know, the NWO had Dennis Rodman and Horace Hogan and the Disciple and Vincent. Oh God, how can you forget Vincent? And so, you know, these, and then NWO 2000 with Bret Hart and Nash and Jarrett, and oh brother, it's just.
And think about this, they even did it in different promotions when NWO showed up in WWE.
With all the people that fought against the NWO, like Booker T and The Big Show. And
well, first they had the correct version. They had the original 3. And then in WWF, they watered it down.
Yeah, at least with the original 3, that was fine up. And if they had stopped with the NWO proper after WrestleMania 18, it wouldn't have been a problem.
No, we're going to have a nostalgia pop at WrestleMania 31 with Triple H versus Sting.
Oh my God, I forgot about that one, where it made no sense why the NWO would help Sting, because Sting was their mortal enemy. But nostalgia. And, you know, it's just... The point being here is that whenever you re-energize something, sometimes it works, but you have to have the circumstances right. You have to, like, at least in the defense of WrestleMania 31, that was kind of fun. Especially because Kevin Nash took a bump and immediately grabbed his quad and everybody popped.
But it's one of those things with nostalgia where it's a very short-term high.
Yeah.
You have to do something fresh, original, and update it. The Midnight Express changing members and updating the gimmick slightly, it's a show of how it works. And all these other examples show how not it works.
Yeah. And there's a fine line between running something into the ground and bringing something back with a second wind. And speaking of... And that's if you get to the second wind, because there are some times that there are matches that just don't even, there's not a gust around, and that's the kind of match that we're going to be watching. Here we go, roll that intro.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week. That's right, folks. It is the match of the week, and it is a kind of a head scratcher. As I found this match as Blackjack Lanza passed away, Skylar and I were just scouring YouTube for matches that included Blackjack Lanza, and I landed on this one just because the participants involved piqued my curiosity. It is the AWA March of 1984. It is the Blackjacks, Blackjack Mulligan and Blackjack Lanza, going up against the team of Nick Bockwinkel, who looked awesome, and Bobby Heenan, and Bobby Heenan. And what did you think of this match?
This match sucked. I hated this match.
Japanese commentary, by the way, which was still more exciting than Michael Cole, Corey Graves, and Byron Saxton.
I told you we should have watched that Dan Dory Funk Jr. match.
Well, well, this match just, I genuinely thought that it was going to be at least a better quality than this. This wasn't great.
Do not sugarcoat this.
I'm being generous because there are redeeming qualities to this matchup. Like Bobby Heenan selling like Shawn Michaels did to Hogan every time that he got close to getting hit. That was gold. Watching him tag in, run around, look all macho, and then tag Bockwinkel back out at the start was great. When the front face lock from Bockwinkel as they were getting the heat, and Bobby Heenan just puts his foot on Bockwinkel's foot to stop Bockwinkel's foot from going underneath the ropes so the referee can't see that his feet are underneath the ropes, which is technically illegal while he's got that front face lock in. That was good. The first set of heat of this was fun, but it took forever getting there with a whole bunch of just slow, meandering garbage, and then the finish made absolutely no sense.
You undersell the offense of this match. The first 3 or 4 minutes of this match was them just stalling for time, doing continuous lockups and just push-offs, which the audience popped for. I will give credit to the audience for popping for this. But if this was what popped fans in 1984, I'm sorry. I'm watching this match. It's like it's molasses at this point. It's
part of the problem.
Slow.
Part of the problem is I understand what they were trying to tell in this first part, right? Because Blackjack Mulligan is huge, and Bockwinkel, who is no pushover, he's not a short dude, by any means. But they were trying to sell the fact that Mulligan is clearly stronger than Bockwinkel, and anytime Mulligan's in the ring, it's going to do some damage, and they did that. But they did that with a couple shoves. They didn't even really get like a body slam in there. They did the attempt at a body slam that didn't work. Like, I get it, but it just went so long. It just would not stop. And then the heat spot wasn't even really much of a heat spot. It was just Bockwinkel got Lanza into the corner. And by the way, the second you saw Lanza tag in, and you saw the size of Lanza versus the size of Mulligan, my immediate thought was, this dude's getting the heat.
Well, obviously it was going to be the smaller guy.
No doubt in my mind, this dude's getting the heat.
And the second he tagged in, it was a whole twist heat spot. Let's get started. It was terrible.
It was so obvious. It was slow, and to be fair to the Blackjacks, this is pretty late in their career. So it's not like they're going to be selling out, it's not like they're going to be pulling out the Hart Foundation and the Rockers, but
this was a year before they're retiring, but still, even watching them, their punches were all over the place. They were not putting their punches in good spots whatsoever. It looks like they weren't even hitting them.
Lanzas weren't bad.
They were hitting them in places that didn't look like it hurt.
Lanzas weren't bad. I would say that Lanza tried, but a lot of it was like these really like weak clubs across the back, which just didn't look like they did anything. And also it didn't help that Mulligan came in and did the exact same breakup every single time, where the referee came in, pushed him back, they did the heels, they did the healing up, but it wasn't like Mulligan did anything different. It just was repetitive, and not in a good way repetitive. It was just like in a bland way repetitive.
His one move was to walk over, try to punch somebody, have the referee restrain him, and have the guys just start getting heat behind the back.
But the problem was the referee wasn't going fast enough, so Mulligan would get there and literally just kind of like weak club being like, all right, you can break me up now, and then the referee would come and break him up. It just, the timing of this was off, and then...
The referee in this match, by the way, was really fucking out of shape.
Yeah,
you see his belly?
He was pretty rough. I
was wondering if it was Chris Jericho, and this is what he was doing before he became a professional wrestler.
God, long before the Thrill Seekers, he was sitting here.
He was the pizza hunter.
Yeah. Oh God,
He needs pizza.
This was bad. And then the one time that they need to be paying attention, and the one time that the camera needs to get the shot, Kevin Dunn pans to the audience. I'm like, was
it Kevin Dunn?
No, but it sure looked like it. Because the second that Lanza goes, he finally starts making, he gets some punches here and there. He knocks Heenan down on the apron. He finally slams Nick Bockwinkel. He goes to make that big exaggerated tag, and the camera cuts to the audience.
And every few minutes, whoever was operating the camera would cut from the action in an important moment to get an audience reaction.
I know, but that's not a problem most of the time. But you can't do that the second he's got the hot tag.
You cut away from the hot tag, that should be you're fired.
And the hot tag that lasted all of 15 seconds as Mulligan goes club.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing, is that they tag in Mulligan, who starts doing this really shitty offense, and then they tag him back Lanza.
And he gets more offense, and then they get another set of heat, and I'm like, what was the point of that? And then the most offensive thing in this match happened to me.
Well, hold on. Let me just say right now, that was a Street Profits. That was even faster than what the Street Profits do.
Yeah.
Because the Street Profits, famously, Montez Ford sells, tag into Angelo Dawkins, then tag back into Montez Ford. This was even quicker than that.
Yeah, it was faster than that. And then they get heat again, and Bockwinkel hits a pile driver. 2 count! What?
And it was a really bad pile driver. It doesn't look like Lanza's head even hit the mat.
But still, it's a pile driver in the 80s. Jerry Lawler was crippling people with that, metaphorically. It's like, how do you... I mean, I understand it's Blackjack Lanza, and the Blackjacks are supposed to be the toughest SOBs around, but this dude just got 6 minutes of heat, tagged him back in, and you hit him with a pile driver, and he kicks out at 2? And did you notice how much that deflated the crowd?
It killed them. It killed them. They were actually excited for the hot tag, and then after the hot tag, this crowd was dead the second that hot tag ended, and then they did the pile driver, and it's just like, you know what? It's not believable anymore.
Yeah, it really wasn't. And this is something with the AWA that was going on right now. This was not Vern's finest moment. And then the finish of this, which was just, speaking of the timing being off. So Heenan goes, or I think it was Bockwinkel, right? No, it was Heenan, because Lanza gets the advantage on Heenan after he gets some kicks. Heenan gets clotheslined by Mulligan on the outside. The referee not going to bother to tell him not to do that. He gets clotheslined, gets pulled in by Lanza, cover 1, 2, 3. But when he's covered, literally Bockwinkel at 2/3 is there hitting Lanza, and the referee still counts 3.
Well, here's the thing, is that Bobby Heenan runs around the ring, happens to run into, it's not even necessarily a clothesline, it's just he ran into
stuck his arm out.
Mulligan's arm. For the weakest clothesline I've ever seen in my entire life.
Man.
That's not even really a clothesline. And the way this referee counts with both of his hands doing the back count.
I love Bobby Heenan, and I know that there are better Blackjacks matches than Nick's, and I love Nick Bockwinkel too. But for the participants involved, JR would say this was bowling shoe ugly.
And who knows? Maybe they thought it was a good match because it did get the fans to kind of pop. If you saw, like, some of the fans were happy and excited. Some of them were not even...
confused more than anything else. This was a confusing match.
And then at the end, they have the fucking Bockwinkel and Heenan raise their hands like they just won and hug each other.
Yeah, there was a cut somewhere, so I don't know whether they had some sort of afterwards heat. Didn't sound like they did anything afterwards. I think they just literally just posed and left, which makes no sense.
Yay, we lost!
This made no sense. I'm sorry, Vern. I like most of Vern's AWA stuff, but this was at the time when you could tell Vern was really starting to lose the grip on what was working and what wasn't working in professional wrestling. And for the talent involved, this did a disservice to all 4 individuals.
I mean, there comes a point in time where you are no longer relevant and you should step away from whatever you're doing.
And maybe Lanza sensed that. And then maybe this match was this way to contemplate himself into agenting. But in order for us to fully understand what Jack Lanza was thinking, we have to talk about the man in our spotlight. And thanks to the wonderful world of content shared websites, you will be getting a very SparkNotes version of his career, and hopefully we will be able to fill more blank spots in going forward, because I honestly want to know more than what's written down on that site.
You know we're talking about Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to give them the free shouts out, but yeah. but they are begging for money. Everybody go donate to Wikipedia, by the way. Do God's work and go donate to Wikipedia. They need the money.
Right. Which, exactly. Like, if you want to keep using Wikipedia, give them the money. Jack Lanza, here's the thing. Where do you want to start with Blackjack Lanza?
Well, the interesting thing that I found about the brief bit that we've got from those little snippets was that in the 60s, the big NWA champion at the time was Gene Knitsky. And ironically enough, after Lanza was trained by Vern, which was in the early 60s, he ended up, before he tagged with Mulligan, he got a 60-minute Broadway with Gene Knitsky, the NWA World's Champion at the time, and it was Lanza who actually had more momentum for the formation of the Blackjacks than Mulligan, and I never knew that.
I think it was one of those things where Vern Gagne, he took Blackjack Lanza under his wing. I think there's a reason why Lanza always went to Vern. I think it's because ultimately he was one of Vern's guys.
Yeah. Well, at least until Vern finally, until the only guy that was left was Vince, and then, Lanza eventually made his way over there. But that I also think was part of what was going down, because he teams up with Mulligan as the Blackjacks, and they win several tag titles across a few different platforms.
Right, and this is a very interesting gimmick. It was during the time, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where you could have characters that have the very simplest gimmicks, but they work. Black cowboy hat wearing, cowboy boot stomping, rugged hombres who drew money wherever they went by kicking your ass.
Well, and you also got to remember what's on TV. What was popular on television at the time? It was the westerns. It's right. Like Chuck Connors and the Rifleman. It's Gunsmoke. It's Bonanza.
Texas Walker Ranger.
Yeah, well, that was a little bit later, but still, the fact remains that cowboy gimmick and what was on at the time was big, and they very well capitalized on that, especially considering the size of both of those individuals.
Right. That's the thing. We're talking about Lanza being the small guy. He's 6'3", 253 pounds.
Yeah. And he's the smaller guy.
Right. And Mulligan's even bigger. He's 6'7", 300 pounds. These are very big boys.
Yeah, and something we didn't mention in that match of the week, Mulligan had physique. Those biceps were huge, bro.
Right, and even though Lanza, he's not necessarily big in the the modern style where he's got abs on abs on abs, but with Lanza, he's built kind of like a barrel chest.
Yeah,
he's got that classic big Southern wrestler style size.
The old school tough guy build. The playing cards, smoking cigars, drinking a glass of bourbon, warm type of physique, which was really probably what was happening. So,
right, the Blackjacks, they were a successful tag team through the 60s, through the 70s, working that NWA style schedule, working with different tag teams. Were they ever NWA World Tag Team Champions?
I believe so, but I can't remember when. It would have had to, I think it was in the 70s that they were, because it was that time they were also a part of the WWWF, Vincent J's, which is where they won the WWF Tag Team Championships from Dominic DeNucci and Pat, I cannot remember his last name.
Pat Barrett.
Pat Barrett, thank you. And Dominic DeNucci is one of those guys we're going to have to do a little introspection on, because every time I've seen him wrestle, I've liked him.
where was this whole thing about Vince McMahon promising Lanza that he would receive at least one world title shot a month?
I think that's bullshit, to be honest. I think somebody might have put that in, probably heard it from a shoot interview, but I'm not sure I believe that. Because that doesn't sound like something McMahon would promise.
Especially because Vince Jr. is not in control of WWE in 1975.
Well, and also Vince Sr. isn't going to be stupid enough to believe that Lanza is going to be his guy in the Bruno era. You know, that wasn't the relationship that Lanza had. That wasn't what he was going to get. So I don't necessarily think that Lanza was, especially because he was with the Blackjacks. It wasn't like they were just going to rip him out of the Blackjacks to give him a world title shot every month. That made no sense.
Right. Now, who knows? Maybe it was a house show thing. So, I don't know.
Maybe, but, you know, this is maybe if you donate to Wikipedia, you will get more factual information, or at least you'll know whether it's factual information. So, but in any case, he does move, you know, they basically remain the Blackjacks for the remainder of his career, going back to the AWA in the 80s to help Vern's struggling AWA with the loss of Hulkamania and a whole plethora of other talent that Vince just gleaned off him.
Right, but the hard part is that they have been wrestling for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And at that point, the thing about big guys is that at that size, and you could tell in that match, it gets hard on the knees.
Yeah. And you know, realistically, they're going to give you what they can, but how much are they going to give you? You know, because even still, I guarantee you that audience there, which wasn't very big, by the way, but that audience there 10 years earlier would have been off the chart. They would have been, literally, the roof would be blowing off that place for the Blackjacks. But this is 1984. We've been around for a very, very, very long time, and everybody recognizes that we're not going to be the future of the sport anymore.
It's nostalgia pop.
Yeah, and you know, and unfortunately, I think that coupled with Vern's booking, you know, where he was gonna book the older guys until everybody turned into powder. That was Vern's. Where do you think Vince got it from? He really got it from Vern Gagne, because that's where he was the one who set the template for running the oldest people possible for as long as he could. Hell, Vern was still doing angles in 86, 87.
But I think that was just because Vern didn't have any young talent to work with. And that's one of those things where I think if he had kept Hulk Hogan and if he had gotten more younger talent, he could have done something.
Well, and I also think it doesn't help because Hogan is Hogan, so he probably guaranteed he told Vern and Greg one thing and then went to join the WWF once the money and the grass looked greener on Vince's side of the wall than Vern's, because Vern's grass was graying and getting old and was dying out, and he didn't want to plant any new grass. And so it's difficult because it's not just the fact that he didn't have younger talent, but he never really went out to get younger talent when he needed younger talent.
I think that's one of those things, is that if Vern Gagne had got more younger talent and maybe developed it, he could have survived, because then he could have used that younger talent. And even if Vince would have taken the big stars away, he still would have had at least a territory instead of declaring bankruptcy.
You know, now that we're really thinking about it, Vince and Vern have quite a lot in common in their later stages of their lives and their years as a promoter. And I never really kind of made that connection until now. Just considering that you realize that, you know, the stars that Vern used to build. I mean, Ricky Steamboat, Rick Flair. There's a laundry list of people that Vern worked with and trained. And, you know, his training was legendary in building some of the very best that professional wrestling had to offer, until he got to that age where he was just using what he knew was going to work, given the fact that business was down.
And he couldn't adapt.
Yeah, and how we turn this into a Vern Gagne introspection, we'll have to do an AWA episode. One of the things I'd like to do, kind of just on a side note in 2022, is occasionally, maybe like once every couple of months or so, we're just going to look at a territory. And we're just going to talk about that territory beginning to end, because a lot of them are, you know, obviously at their end. but we'll just be able to look a little bit into the successes and failures, and we'll do a little research. We'll do some match watching. You know, it was the territory deep dive that I wanted to do and never really got the chance to do. And Vern would be a great place to start.
And my ability to research, and we can do some real stuff.
That's right.
But I think it's important to mention this because, again, Blackjack Lanza was one of Vern Gagne's guys, and he was going to remain Vern Gagne's guy until that time came to an end.
Yeah. Which it did.
But here's the thing, is that he's not even necessarily now known for his wrestling, but he was known for being an agent and a road producer for WWF during the biggest time in WWF's career, money-making.
Yeah. He was pretty much there for...
But when they were hot, the Attitude Era.
Yeah, he was there for pretty much all of it. I mean, it was what, 1990-something? Maybe it was 1987, 88. It was pretty shortly after he retired in ring that he joined WWF as an agent. And he was there all the way up until his health started going in 2016, 2017, I think.
He was there for a long time. I have to look this up. But Lanza and Mulligan, I think they were both agents, correct?
Yes, correct.
So they had a hand in helping make the Attitude Era. And I think people need to recognize that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, their mark, and Lanza's mark on professional wrestling stems far beyond his in-ring career, you know, and he's another one of those guys kind of like the Pat Pattersons, and, you know, maybe you can almost argue Jay Strongbow, although Strongbow has a little more controversy to his agenting career, but, you know, one of those guys whose mark on the business is going to mean more after their in-ring is over. You could argue Dusty Rhodes, with his mark on the generation of NXT that we look on with fondness. You know, he's gonna be in one of those guys where his mark will be felt for a very long time, and a lot of wrestling generations have felt the touch of Blackjack Lanza, and I think that's something really special.
Right, and ultimately, Blackjack Lanza kind of represents the old school and how the old school inform the new school. Like Blackjack Lanza, you can see Blackjack Lanza in certain wrestlers. Like, we know we talked about the gimmick not working, but there was a little bit of Blackjack in Bradshaw, and Bradshaw, he worked that style.
Oh yeah,
just updated.
And now I seem to vaguely remember that maybe Bradshaw was trained by Lanza or something. There is a connection to him and Lanza, and I can't remember specifically what it was.
Here, let me give you the connection. John Bradshaw Layfield is, in fact, Blackjack Lanza's nephew.
Yes, I knew that they were related somehow, and which also helped Bradshaw, and also is a testament to the style that Bradshaw inevitably worked. You know, you could see a lot of, like you said, you could see a lot of Blackjacks in Bradshaw without him needing the gimmick.
If anything, it's kind of like Bradshaw is the Blackjacks updated for the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah. And while his WWE title run will be looked at as one of the worst drawing in history, I still think that I still like JBL. I mean, say what you want about the person, but I still like the gimmick of JBL and what he was able to transform with it. And I'm really glad that somebody in that kind of style got to take the ball of WWE Championship in a more modern era. And, you know, and especially, you know, you look at the legacy of both the Blackjacks, because Mulligan had Barry Windham, who was another one of that style. And then, of course, the tie-in with the Rotundas, you know, that eventually led to Bray and Bo. You know, the whole family tree of the Blackjacks has left, for the most part, a positive impression on professional wrestling. And that is something I can very greatly respect.
Here's a question I have for you. Does Bray Wyatt work like a Blackjack?
No, he works more like an IRS. not even Mike Rotunda. I'm not even saying Varsity Club Mike Rotunda. He works like a IRS.
He steals your money.
Yes, he steals your money and does not give you what you paid for. and I hope you're doing well, Bray, or wherever you are. But in any case, rest in peace, Blackjack. We another one gone of a bygone era.
We'll drink a beer in your honor.
That's right. And speaking of a bygone era, we have gone on too long. And now it is time to take our first commercial break. Next week, ACPW NWL reaches its epic 2021 Season 2 conclusion with 2 fantastic shows. You're going to get excited. I'm already excited. Sky, are you excited?
Maybe.
Maybe means yes, and that means we're all excited.
Well, here's the thing. I have not fully booked my show yet. It will be booked by that time. We'll see what happens, but I'm looking forward to your show mostly because your show is your big show.
Yes, Winter Warfare, which we have a stacked card for, so stay tuned for that. And then, of course, the week after that, we've got the big special. We got the Grapplies to close out the year and give our awards. And if you want a category addressed, leave it in the comments, and we will put it into our heaping hop of happy times in the holiday season. And say that 5 times fast. And with that said, barely, it is time to take our first commercial break. Sky, thank you for another tremendous episode, and I will see you next week, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you to the Court-Martail podcast for allowing us to do what we do.
And of course, wish me a happy birthday because you have to.
I will. Obligatory happy birthday, although it is belated. And if you want to extend birthday wishes to Skylar even when it's not his birthday, you can do that by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that bell button, switching it to all, so you get notified every time we are on the air. And that is the true magic of what we do here at the Court-Martail podcast. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. We'll be right back right after this.